Welcome to the Page 2 podcast, where we uncover the strategies, systems, and tactical decisions that move brands beyond Page 2 and into real visibility across search and answer engines. SEO has always had a measurement problem. You make a change, traffic moves, and then everyone argues about whether that change actually caused it. AI is making that question harder and a lot more important. Today, we're joined by Nick Swan, solo founder of SEOTesting.com, a SaaS product used by agencies, in-house teams, freelancers, and publishers to track whether SEO work is actually moving the needle. We get into statistical significance, why small sites need different testing frameworks, why content refreshes keep showing up as one of the most reliable SEO experiments, and why teams rarely revert failed tests. They just keep iterating. We also dig into the next layer of SEO tooling: MCP servers, Claude Code, AI-generated summaries, log file analysis for LLM crawlers, and whether agencies should build their own tools or rely on products that become the system of record. Nick also left Page 2 listeners an extended 45-day free trial of SEO testing at SEOtesting.com/partner/page2pod. You can also find that link in the show notes. One last quick programming note. This is the final episode of Season 5. We'll be republishing a few previous conversations over the next few weeks before coming back with new episodes. If you learned something new today, subscribe, leave a rating, and let us know what resonated. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome to episode 120 of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and I'm joined by, as always, by my partner at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita.
Hi.
Today, if you've ever made an SEO change and then spent the next 6 weeks staring at Google Search Console wondering if it actually did anything, today's guest has built a tool that answers that question. He's the solo founder of SEO Testing. Nick Swan builds the features, supports the customers, writes the docs, and still finds time to manage a U14 girls football team in Bude, Cornwall. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is a season finale episode, so we got to make it
no
great.
Pressure.
We've been trying to keep up with all the things that you're doing, and it like blew us away how busy you are. Married, you've got 3 kids under 12. You're like leading this software company and like playing a lot of roles within the company. You're competing and like you're cycling. I can see you're swimming all the time. So you're managing like work and life really well, it seems, from social media. Can you just talk us through how you like organize a typical week or fit everything in?
Yeah, so I can be honest now and say the cycling has dropped off. So there's no more cycling going on at the moment. That was a particular period of my life. Coaching the under 14 girls football team has taken over that free time I had for that. So it is interesting with kids. We are super busy with kids. I always said I was never going to be one of these parents that our kids go to lots of sports clubs and we're forever driving them around, but we've accidentally fallen into that trap. And even worse, I manage one football team or soccer team, and my wife manages another soccer team that another child is involved with. Because it's probably perhaps you've been in there as well when they say, we need some people to step forward to manage these teams, and no one puts their hand up, and you're kind of like awkwardly, yeah, okay, I know a bit about football, I'll have a go. So yeah, the swimming is good because that gets me out of the office with some friends.
Oh, wow.
And it's cold water swimming at Bude. We have a sea pool here, so it's kind of cold water immersion therapy, if you like. Go for a nice lunch afterwards and a coffee as well, so that's good. But yeah, I enjoy what I do as well, so it doesn't feel like work, I guess. But yeah, the football is definitely, this is a warning for anyone getting involved in youth coaching, it is definitely a part-time stroke full-time job on top of what else you do.
I was curious, when you started building this tool, or basically this company, is there anything that you thought you knew about SaaS that maybe has changed since you're now building it and a number of years into the process? Anything that, is just very different than what you expected?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at different business models, like the grass is always greener on the other side. Like this is perhaps the same for agency as well. I look at, from a software providing point of view, I look at agencies and go, oh, that looks like a good business model. And agencies look at tools and go, oh, that looks like a good business model. So it's certainly not the kind of, the grass definitely isn't greener on the other side. There's always problems. Support and not dealing with customers, but, supporting customers, that kind of thing is a time sink, and you have to find ways of dealing with that. It's often improving the product and making the product easier to use, but it's documentation and keeping documentation up to date, all that kind of good stuff. I will say, I got into this by accident as much as anything. Back in 2016, I think it was, I was running a voucher codes website or coupon codes website, as you're perhaps more familiar with in the US, with a friend, just as a kind of side project thing. And we were doing the processes that I built the tool for manually. So we were changing page titles and meta descriptions, trying to increase the click-through rate, because a 2 or 3% increase in click-through rate, we could see was a extra few $100s a day on coupon codes and so on. And I was tracking that in Excel. I was that person who was looking at these numbers every day in Google Webmaster Tools, as it was at the time. And so it was really from scratching my own itch that Sanity Check, as it was called initially, came around. And I shared it with some friends, as you do. One of those friends, it was in Facebook groups. One of those friends actually is still a customer now, which is testament to Joshua and his use of the tool. But yeah, he kind of, and some other people kind of gave feedback, this is really interesting. You should perhaps look into this and build this out. And so it kind of accidentally took on its own life there, and it became its own product from there.
Total side tangent, but are you still doing any like affiliate type of websites, or is this SEO testing your primary focus and really where you put all your efforts?
Yeah, SEO testing is the main focus now. The coupon code site is still around, and I keep thinking about revisiting it with AI being able to do a lot of the human process in the loop stuff that we were doing previously. But yeah, SEO testing is full time now. I don't, as you've mentioned, all the different things going on. I don't really have time for another project right now. So
I wanted to get right into the testing side of things, maybe to start talking a little bit about statistical significance, right? Like whenever you're running any sort of test, like you need to figure out what that significant is to say it was successful or not. And that's not all SEO's sort of forte, is sort of modeling those things out or using tools to figure out that. How, I guess in your experience working with a lot of different customers and being sort of a self-service model, how important is that sort of side of analysis and analytics important when someone is starting to roll out tests? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, quite a few. So I'm not a mathematician. My background's in software engineering and SEO. So I kind of had to learn this kind of statistical significance side of things as well as I was building the tool out. And customers started coming to us and say, has this test hit statistical significance? And I was like, what's this statistical significance thing? And I, perhaps like a lot of other people as well, I thought the significance thing was the important bit, which was like, is this test showing enough of a significant uplift to be significant to the business effectively type of thing? But when looking into statistical significance, I've kind of got a way of explaining it that if you are educated in maths and statistics, you may well hate this explanation, but this is my explanation of it. So here we go, right? So it's about the reliability of the data as much as anything, and whether something has happened by chance. And the way I explain it is that if you get a graph and you average out the points and you get a nice line going like this, generally, there's two ways of getting that line of average, right? You can have nice dots that go trend around the line, or you can have random data that zigzags up and down randomly. They equal the same line because they average out the same way. The one that is closest to the line, the little dots, that's statistically significant. The data is reliable. The one that's random, up and down, that's not statistically significant. That data is kind of happening by chance.
It's still hard when you don't have a lot of data. There's a lot of small sites, 10,000 or less visitors every month. Seems like you have to test forever. I wonder if I don't know, do you work with a lot of small sites like that? If so, have you seen any like incredible learning from a small site that you think is a good lesson for a bigger site?
Yeah, that was the other bit about statistical significance I was going to mention as well, actually. So thanks, reminder. Like a site that's getting 10,000, visits a month sounds quite a lot. That only breaks down, across a typical month of 30 days of about 300 and so clicks a day, which isn't a huge amount. With our tool, we have two main types of testing that you can do. We have time-based testing, which is where you look at a page or a group of pages before and after. And we do SEO split testing, which is where you bucket the same type of page into a test group and a control group. You only make the change to the test group. With smaller sites that are getting less traffic, time-based testing can sometimes be the only option, but it's still valid. Although you're only looking at one page before and afterwards, if you see an increase in clicks, there's algorithm update, seasonality can play into whether that increase has, driven that increase, but you can also look at the site trend overall to see whether, it's gone up or down the same rate to have something to compare it against. But yeah, if you're looking at a page that's only getting a few clicks a day, you may not be able to reach statistical significance, but you can still look at other data points, such as you can test on a page and a target keyword as well. So if you've got a high value keyword and you're able to take it from position 22 up to position 5, 6, that's going to be more important than the clicks or, the extra enough traffic that a low volume keyword could so it can't reach statistical significance, if that makes sense.
In a sense, like measuring the visibility gain, which over time, right, even if that keyword has low search volume, will translate into meaningful clicks over time.
Yeah, definitely, especially if it's a high value keyword, depending on the industry. I think that's why it's also important we connect to Search Console and Google Analytics, so we can bring through key event data as well, so we can track through to conversion as well. So if it is that high value keyword that you're really working to, and low traffic keyword that you're working to improve, you can see the metrics, vanity metrics, like clicks, impressions, average position going up. But you can also track it through to the sanity metrics and the ones that the business ultimately care about, which is, the return on investment of around submissions, purchases, signups, whatever it may be.
How do you get to see what is succeeding and not succeeding? With all the clients using your software, do you have a way of kind of understanding high level the tests that are being run and what's winning and what's losing? Or do you have to have conversations with customers to understand that?
Both. So we can see some visibility. So I get an email every day come through, like an admin backend type email saying these are all the tests that are finished. So I can see the tests that customers have been running, how they've been doing from a clicks, impressions, average position point of view. So we keep an eye on that to see whether there's any trends and so on. And that's a lot easier now with AI in terms of summarizing data and trends and so on. But then we talk to a lot of customers too as well. So keep the conversations going in terms of what they're working on, what they're currently testing, that kind of good stuff too. So both sides of it.
Curious, there's got to be like this really boring test that it's not. Is there like a boring test that you see over and over? Oh my gosh, another person's testing this. It's clearly going to win. This thing wins all the time. Is there something boring that everyone should try to do?
So we've, I checked out the data for this. Interestingly, so for our business, we've been around just back coming up to 10 years now. So on our About Us page, I wanted to put some stats for AI to use to see how viable we were as a real business type thing. So I did look up the number of tests that have been run on our platform recently, and our customers in total have run about 140,000 tests. So that's quite a big sample size. I will say the majority of those are single SEO tests, which is quite often on one individual page, which kind of goes back to kind of our ideal customer type thing. It's not particularly exciting, I guess, but the one test that's run the most that you can always see, a change in, whether it's up or down, is content refreshes and content rewrites. So keeping content up to date, fresh. We know that Google generally likes that. It likes up to date content. And now even we're learning that LLMs like that as well in terms of freshness as well, and keeping content up to date and updated pages. So content refreshes are a big thing. The one thing that I found really interesting from speaking to our customers is I guess when I was pitching the product, I was doing it as like, make the change to your page, track the results of how that page performs. If it's good, you can perhaps roll that out to other pages. If it's not, you can reverse it. But then speaking to our customers, what we actually found out was that people don't reverse those changes. They kind of iterate onwards from there. So they'll take a page and they'll make the changes, the refresh. They'll track it. If it's not a good result, they won't revert back. They'll go again until they kind of get the result or increase that they're interested in seeing.
Maybe where we should have started, you mentioned your ideal customer. Who is that? I mean, I guess that's probably what we should have started with.
Well, it's changed recently, and you'll kind of understand why when I say who it used to be. So I know like good guidance is to only have one ideal customer profile, but we've ended up with 4, I guess. Agencies. So people are looking after lots of clients because they have to work with lots of clients and keep track of lots of data. So we kind of help that process. In-house SEOs. So one of the ways that people use our tools is experiments. So running tests. They've got an idea. They want to see if it improves rankings, gets more clicks and so on. But again, from speaking to our customers, we found that people were just using the time-based testing framework as a reporting mechanism as much as anything. So they're given a job of making changes to a page, and they just want to be able to show this is how it was doing 6 weeks before compared to this is how it's doing 6 weeks afterwards. So rather than having to go to Search Console and set up all those filters all those times, they can just set up the test in our tool. It tracks the data. It lets you know when it's finished, and they can present the data in a really easy to understand way to stakeholders and management and so on. So in-house SEO teams definitely use it for demonstrating impact of work. Freelance consultants, again, for a similar reason, have been able to show data and results to clients. The fourth one that's kind of not disappeared, but reduced is the content publishers. I'm going to say, I guess, mummy bloggers. Mummy bloggers isn't the right word, is it? But people who are publishing recipes on their site, that kind of thing. They used to be a big kind of sector of our customer, but obviously with Google reducing informational content and having AI overviews at the top now, those kind of sites aren't generating as much traffic. And for some of those sites, the traffic has gone completely. They're kind of a much smaller size of customer profile now.
We've been working with Claude to basically tap into Monday.com, which is what we use for our sort of project management, and try to pull down tasks that were completed for the month, connect that with Google Analytics and Google Search Console, and try to do some of that reporting as well. But the connections are, kind of clunky. Your approach to just highlight changes that are being made and impact of those changes sounds a lot cleaner. We got to let it spin.
You could try the MCP server for that now, actually, as well. That would be interesting. So yeah, that's something we've just released recently, and people have been loving too. So
yeah,
very good transition. We wanted to talk about it.
So maybe let's just dive right in there. So you originally launched a Google Search Console MCP that was, I guess, sort of like a test case, if you will, or basically just to learn how that MCP framework sort of worked. Mm-hmm. Maybe take us through that. Like, what did you learn from that release that you were then able to apply to the SEO testing MCP?
Yeah, so free tools is one of our kind of marketing efforts, really, in terms of like putting things out there that people can use for free, that help build links, get your name out there, that kind of stuff. So when the MCP framework came around, we were like, it's a bit of a race because we know someone else is going to do it. So I think on exactly the same day, 2 of us published our MCP servers. So it was as much a learning exercise to learn about what the whole MCP server thing was all about, how it worked, how we could build one. But then it was also a marketing thing of, it's something you can share and talk about and will get shared around in the industry. Off the back of that, we published our MCP server. It got shared around. It did reasonably well. We haven't developed it any further, I don't think, from that initial making it available type thing, as much as anything, because the Search Console API hasn't really changed since that date, I don't think. But then we built, off what we learned from that, we built our own MCP server for SEO testing itself, which does pull through Search Console data from a lot of the reports that we have kind of built and configured. And then also you can use the SEO testing functionality around creating tests, annotations, all that kind of good stuff. It's one of those kind of things that people didn't actually ask for. We didn't know how people were going to use, but it was like, again, with Claude Code and Codex, it was something that, I'll be honest, it was a weekend project for me. So I think on that weekend, I didn't have any football. We had a kind of predefined, we had an API already, right? So the MCP server just sits in front of the API and kind of describes the API. So the LLM knows how to interact with it. With Claude Code, I was able to kind of say, these are our API endpoints. I'd like to write an MCP server. It went and did it, got it working locally. I was like, this is like magic type thing. And so then put it out there. And this is one of the benefits now of Claude Code and Codex and so on is, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself as well, of just being able to build proof of concepts quickly, because we always have ideas and we think they're going to be the best thing since sliced bread. But actually, when you do it, it doesn't always work out as you hope. And customers don't always use it the way you think they're going to use it, or at all sometimes. So just being able to build it quickly, get it out there. And this is one of the things that people have really started to use. And so we've got, again, a little internal dashboard thing where we can see which customers have been using it, what they've been using it for. That helps start conversations, that kind of thing. And we have our customers who do use Claude already, haven't perhaps figured out how to use the SEO tested MCP server, or it hasn't baked into their workflows yet. And they're really keen to learn how other people are using it. So I kind of need to speak to the people who are using it, help build out workflows or documentation, and then be able to share it with others so other people can learn how to use it too.
That MCP server you released maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago. Yeah, it was relatively recent.
I watched a Loom that you published on basically like a how-to. Here's the ways that you can use it. And you mentioned the endpoints that you chose initially. There were like 27 endpoints users could interact with. So you get to see how people, I know you're asking for feedback a lot, but you also get to see exactly what people are doing with it. Of the 27 endpoints you started with, what's bubbling to the top?
Well, some of the reports we have, one of the issues that you might find if you're building your own MCP server based off Search Console data as well, is if you make lots of requests to Search Console, it can time out on that data potentially. The data that you're getting back from Search Console, it could potentially time out because it could be passing a lot of data from Search Console to the MCP server and back to Claude for it to deal with. With our API will sit in the middle and it will request all the Search Console data and aggregate it in the way we want it to, such as the content decay report, and then pass that aggregated data to Claude. So it passes a lot less data rather than just the raw data, if that makes sense. And so it is really about building workflows around that and chaining different things together within our tool. So you can, I think the video you may have seen, you can ask for the content decay report. what's really interesting and something I didn't realize is that our content decay report is built in one particular way. Claude actually did a really good job of building it another way, where it filtered by sections of the site. So you could see which content had decayed within the blog section, which had decayed within the Google Search Console section documentation we have, and that kind of thing. So it built the data out of the data out in a different way. And you could obviously go back to Claude and say, actually, I don't want to see it this way. I want to see it that way. So you can take our data and visualize it in a completely separate way that makes more sense to you. We then have our lab section tools, which helps you come up with suggestions of how to improve pages. So that kind of process of refreshing, updating pages, that kind of thing. I haven't set this up, but you could then in theory set up a WordPress kind of MCP server to actually publish those updates for you, I think. And then you, within SEO, within the MCP server as well, you can just say, I made a change to this URL, create the test for me. And it will go and create the test for you with some sensible defaults that, we would recommend to people anyway, like 8 weeks before, 8 weeks after type thing. But then what's also good as well, I guess, is you can, and we've seen some of our customers do this, you can twin the MCP servers together. So if you are using Hrefs, you can use their MCP server to bring through data around link information, that kind of thing for URLs. So you don't just have to think of the MCP server as just being one thing. You can bring multiple MCP servers together effectively.
You mentioned the content evaluator. There was a great sort of case study that you shared on LinkedIn. I think Alex Galinos shared it, where he was using the persona generator that you have in your lab section to basically build out, personas based on keywords for individual pages. And then he would run that content through the content evaluator, identify the gaps. And he was using the MCP to sort of facilitate a lot of those tests once that data came back. Talk to us a little bit about those two tools, the persona generator and the content evaluator, for those who haven't used it. Like how does that persona generator work based on keywords? Are those being pulled from Google Search Console?
I'll give you the whole source of this, of how you can build this type of tool yourself. I think Mike King wrote a big, long article on Search Engine Land, maybe, about preparing for LLMs and GEO. It wasn't called GEO at the time. But he referenced about 10 or 15 Google patents within the article. And I was like, these Google patents have got really great information in, for reverse engineering stuff. Now, historically, you'd have to go and read those patents and fully understand them and so on. But now with LLMs, you can kind of give it to ChatGPT and say, give me the summary of this and how it can help me with my work. And so within our lab section of SEO testing, this is kind of like our experimental area, where for us, if we can encourage people to create tests, people become good users. And so bits of our tool make suggestions about improvements that people could make on their pages and so on and things like that. And the lab section is one of those areas. I built out this lab section and I was kind of like struggling to think of a good way to describe it to people. And ultimately it's a set of skills that you kind of build for Claude Code. Now, me as a developer and perhaps yourselves, you're comfortable working in the terminal and with Claude Code and building your own skills and so on, but not everybody is comfortable in the terminal. And so that lab section has kind of ended up being a bunch of skills, but they've got a UI to them that looks familiar to people who are used to using SEO tools. And so what I did is one of the first tools that we built, or skills that we built, is a query fan out generator. And this was as simple as, and this is the thing I think everyone can do, is take those Google patents and put them into ChatGPT and tell ChatGPT that you want to generate a prompt that will effectively take the information within these patents and build out the functionality that we want. And so it generated kind of the whole prompt for me. There's more about it in terms of going back and forth and the amount of data that you pass back and forth to the LLMs to generate the queries when you fan it out and so on, that, you need some, not developer skills, but you kind of need to know what's going on in the back end and bringing it all together and so on. But all I was trying to do to start with was to take an initial query and fan it out so that we could then, do some cosine similarity and are we answering that query on the page, that type of thing. But because I put those patents into ChatGPT and I asked it to help me build the tool out, it built the whole section about user personas out for me. And it says you need to start thinking about, who the users are that are actually typing in these queries. And the query fan out stuff is really interesting, but the user persona thing is like, I kind of been blown away by that, because we always say, put yourself in the shoes of your customers and think like your customers. And you try to, we all do, right? But for the LLM actually does this for you, and it does a really good job of saying who those personas are and these are what they think about, and these are their concerns, and these will be their questions, and that kind of thing. And just having that, those user personas is really interesting. And so what Alex did is, going back to the LinkedIn post that you mentioned, it helped them actually build out a tool. I guess it goes back to, again, the thing that's driving traffic and this kind of stuff. So they built out a tool that actually their user persona specifically would really be interested in using. And that tool that they built based on those understanding more about their user personas is what's done well and driven extra traffic to their pages and so on. So yeah, sorry, that's a long answer, but hopefully it gives some ideas to people as well in terms of take these patents, put them into LLMs and ask these LLMs how these patents can help you with your work and build tools for you, because that's what we've effectively done.
I feel like personas had like their heyday recently and you don't hear about them too much anymore, but they're so important for anything content related or, just generating lead or sale, whatever it is. One question I had just around, generally speaking, right, all of the use of these LLMs to, report against test results, or even on the persona and content generation side, is that hallucination, I guess, risk, right, that everybody sort of exposes themselves to when they're using these tools. How do you help, I guess, mitigate some of that in terms of getting those responses back?
Yeah, so two sides to that. I think with the labs tools that we use, where we analyze the page on your content, we specifically, and again, this is where perhaps a developer background does help, rather than ask the LLM, go and analyze this URL, we grab that HTTP request, that URL itself, we get the content back, we convert it to Markdown, and then we pass that Markdown to the LLM to analyze. So we make sure that it's not going to hallucinate on the content that's on that page, or even just make it up altogether, or it be a cached version or whatever. We grab that content itself and we will pass it to the LLM and then ask it to work with that Markdown content. The same kind of thing, I guess, with data. So again, this is interesting. It shows how quickly things are changing. So I think you're alluding to the end of month report that we have, where we have lots of data around month on month versus year on year, and then how the top pages from the last month, top queries, how they've changed up and down, that kind of thing. Back in December, I tried to use AI to generate some summaries around that, and it didn't do a great job. So we kind of put it on the back burner. And then as the models have improved, only like 4 months later, we tried again when a new model was released. And the output, again, it's kind of like a wow moment in terms of like, wow, this is actually really, really good. And so the data that we display, we take that and we push that directly into the model itself or the LLM itself, rather than asking it to guess or whatever. So we take data, we push it directly in. The one good thing that I feel has made our kind of AI summaries really, really good are the things that people are putting into SEO testing. So we annotate our graphs. So we add algorithm updates that have officially been announced. People are creating tests. So we pass those into the AI summarization process. People can annotate their data, and they can create content groups, which is subsections of the site, and we pass all of that into the AI summary as well. So everything that you're creating within SEO testing, we pass it through to that kind of summarization pipeline, I guess, and it goes all into what is output then, in terms of these are the things that have gone up, these are the things that have gone down, these are the things you should be worried about, this is what you should look at. The algorithm update hasn't affected your site, this algorithm update has affected your site, kind of thing. It gives you a really good drill down of kind of what's been going on. Now, I'm not saying trust it completely. As with any output from AI, we should review it. But, as you perhaps know, and your team knows, producing end of month reports is a 2 to 3 hour process. Anything we can do to reduce that, really, as the eyebrows raise then, perhaps there's more. Anything we can reduce that and help speed that up while still having the quality bar high, it's got to be a good thing.
As an agency owner, one last question on the MCP side. I was really curious around the efficiencies. So let's say, we are managing like 30 clients or 40 clients or whatever, and we wanted to use the MCP. What sort of efficiencies do we get through there? Are we, can we sort of chain questions together around a group of clients, or is it still sort of looking at things individually?
The efficiencies, I would say, are around, the efficiencies in terms of creating tests. It's a lot easier to create tests, just one line. We made a change to this URL. It's really clever in terms of it figures out which site you're referring to and so on. So it will have access to all of that. Yeah, you can chain things together. The one thing I haven't tried yet, and I really want to try, is with the co-work side of things, of being able to automate the requesting of reports and stuff like that. That would be really interesting in terms of, we have, I was listening to the previous podcast with Everett, was it, I think, in terms of content pruning and so on. So we have a report we call the content quality report, where we will report to you, which pages haven't got any clicks or impressions and so on from a sitemap XML file. At the moment, that's a manual request type thing at the moment, but it'll be really cool if you can set up Cowork to request that report for you, summarize the results, that kind of thing. I think you can do it, but I haven't tested it myself yet. So if you can't do it, I expect it will be coming soon anyway. So it'll be good to do from that point of view. The one thing I really want us to get to is, at the moment, I think it's the same with most SEO tools as well. It's very much a pull kind of thing where you have to pull the data down and then take action on it, whether it's pulling a report or pulling a view or whatever. We're going to be having webhooks built in so that when things happen to data, we can push that data to you. So then you can decide to take action on that. So whether that's a test finishing and we push the test results to you, and then either you as the person or the LLM that is pushed to can take action on that on your behalf, or whether there's a massive drop in clicks to an individual page and we push that event to you to say this has happened, you need to look at it, or new queries the page has started to rank for, that kind of thing. We've got a current issue at the moment, and this is, I was going to say nationwide, that's a weird thing to say, but industry-wide is the right term, isn't it? In terms of, I've been saying to you the stuff we've been building with Claude Code and Codex. It's great that it's opened that up to everybody now. Everybody can build these tools and so on. The thing that we want to make us still relevant is for us to kind of be the system of record of changes that are being made to pages and so on, and also being that central hub in terms of if something happens, we can push that data out to you. So you still need to make SEO testing still relevant, us being that central system type thing.
I've got so many follow-ups to that one, but I guess I'm most curious. My first question is going to be about a tool I think you released before the MCP server. It was your LLM Log Analyzer. I think that log analysis, I think it can be overwhelming. Just the thought of plowing through that much data to try to find insights. Could you talk to us a little bit about that tool and how your customers typically use it?
Wow, this is a real funny story, right? Every presentation, well, not every presentation, but you watch presentations at conferences and so on, everyone says you need to do log file analysis to see, which URLs LLMs are requesting behind the scenes because it won't be reported in analytics and search console and so on. So it was like, yeah, we need to build this tool. Everyone's going to need to use it because everyone's saying you need to do it. I think one person has used that tool so far. so this is like the thing where when you build, you think stuff is going to work and you build it. Like this is a case of you think stuff is going to work and build it and nobody has used it. So I think everyone knows they should be doing log file analysis. And it was really surprising when I did it in terms of the pages that we've run it, obviously, in terms of pages that are getting requested by ChatGPT and so on.
What's really funny?
Nobody's doing it.
What's really funny is I was on a user panel with Patrick Hathaway at Sitebulb, myself included. We've probably been in the industry, 15, 20 years. And we were all asking, like, when are you guys going to release a log file analyzer? And Patrick was like, probably never. It's exactly to your point. A lot of people know that they should be doing it, but the actual gathering of the log files themselves, depending on where you're hosted, they get overwritten constantly. The files themselves are so big, you can't really email them around. And his point was, it's just a lot of people want to do it, but just aren't. So that's really interesting that you've seen so few people actually, leverage it.
There's a couple of interesting things I can say from analyzing our own log files. This comes back to the hallucination thing you mentioned, is that LLMs are hallucinating about URLs you have on your site. So if it thinks you're an authority about a topic, it might start requesting pages that it thinks should exist, but actually don't. And so you can use that in two ways in terms of I'm thinking about this on the fly, actually. You can use that in a couple of ways in terms of actually maybe you should create a page on that topic if ChatGPT thinks you should know about it. That's the bit I just thought about on the fly. But then also as well, it was I was surprised ChatGPT, and there was the main one that we were getting requests from. It was requesting pages that we don't get any traffic to from Google. And I think, again, this goes back to the previous one that Everett was talking about in terms of content pruning and so on. Informational content used to be a big channel for us. We're a tool that sits on top of Google Search Console, so we used to write about all the Google Search Console topics we could come across, right? We don't get hardly any traffic from those anymore because those answers are in AI overviews. And so the pages that ChatGPT was requesting information from are kind of those informational pages that we probably content prune now, because we weren't getting clicks from them from ChatGPT either. And it's like, well, why should we feed that that beast. We may well be getting references and quotes in there, but again, it's difficult. As a small team, I'm kind of now sitting on that informational content going, if we're not keeping it up to date and we're not keeping it fresh and we're not getting clicks from it from Google, should it exist on the site anymore? So we're going through that whole process as much as anything. And that touches on a few different things, but
monthly deliverables now when we're pulling reporting is basically an export of any URLs that has generated an LLM session or visit. We basically do a quick, scrub to see what the status codes are. And there's a lot of 404 errors in there. And that's basically the workflow with the client is, hey, does this topic theoretically make sense? Or was it an old URL that we just missed a redirect for? But yeah, it's really started some interesting conversations. The other thing that comes out of that is LLMs definitely do not follow robots.txt files or commands. Like they'll crawl anything and everything. That's the other sort of interesting bit there.
Yeah, I am. The website's hosted on WP Engine, and they're very much, their billing is focused around user sessions per month and so on. And so every quarter I'd have an argument with them about, they tried to bill on overages. And I was like, no, there's no chance. This is what's in Google Analytics. This is what's in Search Console. They were quoting like wildly above what we were near. And I was like, this is definitely not happening. And then I think they changed their terms and conditions or their policy because they used to exclude bot traffic in their user sessions. But now I think they include it because they realize so much traffic is and requests are coming from ChatGPT and the LLMs and so on. All of a sudden they're going, oh no, your overages includes ChatGPT and that kind of thing now as well. So it's worth keeping an eye on just from that point of view as well.
I was curious, Google is definitely behind in terms of integrating AI data into Google Search Console. I was curious if you're thinking about or maybe have already leveraged any of Bing's data that they're starting to integrate in. I know at SEO Week, they also announced they're going to be pushing a lot more data. I'm curious if you've thought about that or maybe how difficult that would even be to integrate into the platform.
We'd love to. I did ask the question last time they made an announcement whether it's supported in the Bing API, and it's not at the moment, unfortunately. So we're kind of a bit hamstrung by that. There's perhaps some automation stuff we could do with the browser, but I'd kind of rather shy away from that and get them to support it via the API. But yeah, any data that they make available, whether it's via the Search Console API or the Bing Webmaster Tools API, we'd be all over that as quick as we could to get that integrated. We bring some Bing data in already to SEOTesting on our main dashboard, which is useful. And some sites, Bing is more important than others. But yeah, as soon as they make that data available, and everyone's begging Google to make data about AI overviews and so on available within Search Console. But yeah, it's just frustrating, isn't it?
You've definitely evolved the tool a ton, especially with AI and figuring out ways to identify queries and update content, things like that. I was curious to get your thoughts on how you envision the future of SEO tools to evolve. Could be testing tools, could be even like rank tracking tools. They're struggling as well, right? Just with the removal of the number equals 100 parameter. So they're sort of hamstrung even getting beyond page 2 and 3 and so forth. Do you have any thoughts there? I mean, you must be thinking about this to some degree.
Yeah, totally. Again, it goes back to, how do we be a good tool for people? And ultimately it comes back to if people set up tests within our tool to track the results of changes to pages, that's where we deliver value. Some customers, we slot nicely into their workflows and as they learn or whatever, it's part of their SOPs. We make change to client page, we go create tests within SEOTesting and that gets nailed. Some customers sign up, it doesn't make it into their workflows and within 3 to 4 months, you're kind of like, we're not using the tool and they end up churning. I've tried 2 or 3 times to build a kind of page monitoring system. So in my brain, what we want to happen is that we will monitor your site or the client site, kind of like Content King that was bought by Conductor. And we will, let you know when pages are changed because not all clients are great in terms of letting you know when they're making changes to pages and that kind of stuff from one aspect. But then also, if we do notice changes, we can alert you to them and we can say, hey, we think you should set up a test for this content group because we notice these pages have all changed at the same time to kind of proactively, again, get people to set up tests. I built a couple of proof of concepts and it was kind of always on the back burner, but I had a kind of like, not an epiphany, but again, a thought of to why this could be important in terms of, people are building more agentic workflows. And so it's not necessarily going to be humans that are making changes to pages anymore. It could also be LLMs and agentic workflows that are making changes that, we don't even know about unless we have some kind of tool monitoring those pages. So I'm kind of like, actually, this is another use case for this page monitoring tool in terms of keeping an eye on the website that agents are changes and so on behind the scenes. And then again, we would suggest, we've noticed that these 10 pages have changed within this cluster. Why don't you set up a test for it so you can monitor the performance on how those pages are performing?
I've heard you say 99% of your code is developed by Claude Code, or at least recently. Maybe you said that a few months ago. I assume you're also using GitHub.
Yes. Yeah. So that's
how many things have you started on GitHub that nobody can see that you just haven't released yet because it's just not like, how many ideas do you have in the chamber ready to go? You just can't publish them.
Yeah, we built a prompt watcher a year and a half ago, and I was never happy with it because of the data kind of being synthetic. But then everybody else seems to have built that and be selling that anyway. So we've got 2 or 3 prompt watchers within GitHub that we never released. But to be honest, most of the other stuff that we have built, proof of concept wise, we put into that lab section. And so within the tool. And so we're quite clear, this is a beta section and stuff in here is proof of concepts. It's user beware type stuff. And people kind of like that because people like trying new stuff as well. So it's kind of worked both ways of helping us get stuff out and then also keeping customers excited about what's coming out as well. So I think, the log file analyzer is a good example of, stuff that should work that hasn't. And query fan out thing and other tools are, just things that have been developed relatively quickly that people are finding real use from. So as a product person, we try and do customer interviews and talk to our customers as much as we can and so on and pay attention to what's going on in the industry. But until something's in front of them and on their screen and they can push a button, you don't necessarily know what is and isn't going to be useful and what's going to fit into people's workflows and what they're going to find useful. So yeah, trial and error. But that's become a lot easier now in terms of being able to build these proof of concepts and stuff.
I was going to ask, do you prefer Claude Code or Codex? Or do you find different use cases?
So this has changed just within the last day or so. So I have been Claude Code all the way. But within SEO testing, we did a big release, a big rewrite of our main app, the web app, that we went live with back in January. But we've got a lot of legacy code that's running in the background. And I expected Claude Code to be able to migrate this legacy code over really easily. Like it's a perfect use case for what it should be able to do. And it just kept messing it up all the time. And it used to, because again, this is developer background helping, and I wrote this code. Some of this code was written back in 2016, 2017. That's how legacy it is. I was like, have you covered this bit? Have you done this edge case? And he goes, oh no, thanks for pointing this out to me. Right. Shouldn't point this out to you. So I was like, right, now's the time. Let's try Codex. Just yesterday, literally. And I don't know if it's because of my frustration with Claude Code, but Codex is kind of seems to be doing it really, really nicely and well. So we shall see. Yeah, but it's good to have. It's it's nuts. What a time to be alive, right? We can get these things built and build these proof of concepts, and yeah, it's amazing.
If there was another SaaS product you could bring to market, maybe in marketing, maybe not, but definitely not SEO, what do you think you'd enjoy building?
That's funny because it'll be kind of like a amateur football club management software. I go to these committee meetings and people say they're going to do stuff and they never get done, and the storing of committee meeting minutes and the marketing website and the writing up of match reports and what I've been this close to starting now. I probably will. It's I've had a couple of businesses before SEO testing, and I've tried to start up others that have failed. The ones that have done well and I've carried on with have always been that have solved my own problem initially. I don't know. It's just that you tried to build for someone else, and I lose interest in building for someone else maybe, whereas I'm always solving my own problem. There's always one customer. It's always me at least. And, been lucky in terms of finding other people have found those tools or whatever useful too.
So maybe a tougher follow-up question. It is a little bit easier to build tools, especially point solutions, if you're only trying to build a tool to do one thing. So your product solves a lot of problems, but if somebody only really needs to solve one problem, maybe they have the initiative to build it themselves. How are you thinking about holding on to that customer who's savvy enough to build their own point solution, but still can benefit from subscribing to a tool like yours?
Yeah, so we've lost customers who have done that exact thing. And to be honest, I say, all the power to them. It's, to be honest, it's what I would be doing. So I can't really begrudge other people going off and doing it. I think they're more freelancers, consultants who have got that hacker mindset maybe, and that get up and go attitude and want to improve their own processes and grow the business and so on. I think this goes back to our ideal customers more of an in-house team or an agency. Again, this is my working thesis in terms of an in-house team of a multi-million-dollar e-commerce business doesn't want to rely on Bob, who's vibe coded an application. And, they might do this once, but then when Bob leaves in 3 months' time, and this was a critical piece of their workflow ended up being, and now there's no one to support it type thing. I kind of think that there's still the place for tools like SEOTesting that are business critical and important place for us. So yeah.
I just a suggestion. You have a big community of customers, getting them to get not in a conference, but some kind of way for them to learn from each other. I think that's like unique to you. I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a Slack channel and we've actually tried to build a little bit of community into the tool itself as well. So we've got a little discussion forum built into the tool itself, because I think that's one thing as well that could be a kind of positive thing for us as a tool with multiple customers, as you say. If you vibe code a tool, it's just you using it. Whereas if you've got a community aspect to the tool as well, people are sharing ideas and tips and industry news and good videos and podcasts like this one, then that kind of builds it within the community within the tool itself as well.
All right, why don't we transition to a couple of rapid fires, and to wrap things up, is there maybe a book or a podcast that you'd recommend, something that maybe has helped shape how you built SEO testing?
Yeah, so from a SaaS startup point of view, I'd recommend Startups for the Rest of Us, which is Rob Walling's podcast, which has got hundreds of episodes. And so if you're interested in start bootstrapping your own software business or SaaS tool, that's a great one to check out. In terms of we're getting excited about AI and how much we can do and all this kind of stuff. Cal Newport has got a great podcast. He wrote Slow Productivity and Deep Work and Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And so it's good just to listen to his kind of thing about slowing down and being an expert and not rushing and producing good work, that kind of thing as well. So while it is very exciting and what a time to be alive, still focusing on being an expert within your field type thing. Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice or message you remember from Rob Walling you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, there's quite a few. He's got a good book actually. So I would pull this off the SaaS Playbook is what his book I would recommend. But interestingly, it's not around, you'd think from listening to his podcast and his book, it'd be around sales and marketing and how to get your first 10 customers, that kind of thing. But the best bit of advice probably I'd taken from his podcast is around taking a founder's retreat. So we're so far into the work and, deep in the ditches, digging holes, whatever, working away, writing code, that it's good and important just to take a step back every now and again. So I try and do it once a year, perhaps at the beginning of the year, like second or third. Annoyingly, when we get through Christmas and January, and then we've got 2 kids' birthdays within the first couple of weeks of January. So I can never start the new year until those are out of the way. But then into the 3rd week of January, I'll always try and take a founder's retreat where I'll just disappear by myself for 2 or 3 days and kind of think about, I write in a journal as well every day or every couple of days. So I'll try and review that journal, then think about what I want to try and achieve in the next 12 months, that type of thing. So just taking that time away from the computer is good and important.
Incredible. I find cycling is great for that too. I don't cycle in a group. I cycle by myself. And when I go out for a couple of hours on a bike, I fill myself with ideas. Let me ask you one more rapid fire. Is the cycling better where you are now in Bude, or was it better? You moved from Reading. I assume you cycled in both places.
Yeah, no, I didn't cycle in Reading, funnily enough. I would say peak cycling was during COVID lockdowns because of no cars being on the road. I think it was just different then, of just like being out on the road, not having to worry about what's coming behind you to overtake and all that kind of stuff. That was peak cycling for me. And just after COVID, I did Land's End to John O'Groats. So one end of the country all the way up to the top.
Is there a feature or maybe, a component of the tool that you'll ship in 2026 that you can pre-announce or that you are excited that you're starting to build?
I think I've probably mentioned them both already. Mm-hmm. So the page monitor side of things. So we already have a sitemap monitor where we use the last mod date within sitemap files to tell you which URLs have been added or changed, but we can't tell you what's changed on the page. But again, so point we want to get to is be able to tell you what's changed on the page. So page monitor and then also the webhook side of things as well. So being able to push events and data to you.
I did have a question about that. Are you thinking about pushing that to like a Slack channel that identifies, or is it over email or multiple different ways?
Anything that can. So a webhook is basically like your own API that you can HTTP post data to. So it could be anything. There's things you mentioned like Slack supports webhooks, for example. N8N workflows. So you can kick off workflows within N. Anything that supports webhooks really.
All right, last question. Where should listeners go to test SEO testing, and any offers for the listeners?
Yeah, so we have a 14-day trial by default. So we've got an extended trial that we can offer to listeners for 45 days. So I did send through the link, which you can put in the show notes because I can't remember.
SEOtesting.com/partner/page2pod.
There you go. So yeah, get on that for the extended trial. It's me doing support quite a lot of the time. So if you use a little chat widget in the bottom, you can talk directly to me and pass through any feature requests and so on. What's funny as well, actually, sorry, just going back to another thing, is we have a suggest a feature. I copied this from someone else, where we pop up a little thing and it asks people to write the prompt as though they were going to build it themselves. And so we can actually, occasionally we've been able to take someone else's prompt and actually use that within Claude Code itself directly and say,
that's
this
brilliant.
Is what someone requested type thing. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll be on support. Feel free to ask me questions.
Well, Nick, this has been great. So I'm really happy that we were able to make this work, and perfect episode to wrap up the season. So thanks again for joining us on the Page 2 podcast. For those listening, if you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.